Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Live Chat with James here at ProPix TV in Vancouver, British Columbia. Of course, on the first half, for the first hour, we talked about Donald Trump, his history, and how we should have seen him coming decades ago. Whether that had to do with his 1970s lawsuits of $100 million against the government for going after him for his illegal practices on rental units, discriminating against African Americans, blacks, whatever the term is you may want to use. But the point is very clear that he was prioritizing white renters, and not only prioritizing, but segmenting anybody else. Now, he went as far in other terms or other cases where he actually brought in homeless people to sleep in empty units in order to get rid of the honest residents that were living in those buildings that were rent controlled. Again, just a pattern of abuse, intimidation, bullying, and of course, threats. Now, this is nothing new to Donald Trump. This is nothing new to the Trump organization. He's been doing it for decades. He's been throwing people under the bus. He is walking away even back then when he was found guilty and he had to pay out settlements and so many other cases over the many years. And again, 4,000 plus civil lawsuits against Trump and the Trump organization over the years. That is far beyond any other developer or billionaire, plain and simple, or millionaire. I doubt that he'll be a billionaire for too much longer. I think that his stock will crash at some point. However, as we move forward to part two, I must remind you that there is the phone line, both WhatsApp and, of course, traditional call line that you can call in on if you want to be a part of the conversation, or if you wish to express your opinion, you're more than welcome to do so. Area code, so dial 1-368-997-6741 from anywhere. Yes, telephone number is 1-368-997-6741. You can also use that number to call in on WhatsApp. Yes, WhatsApp is live and ready for your calls. If you want to come onto the show to have your opinion heard, by all means, you're very welcome to do so. And we look forward to having conversations on the program. So once again, you can call in live at 1-368-997-6741. And again, you can use WhatsApp to call in on the same number. I will even double check and make sure that our WhatsApp is open for part two of the program. Yes, it is. Hello. Let's see. Who have we got here? That's coming in as just a hello and a wave. Thank you very much to the individual with the number 7380 at the end, because you didn't include your name. But hello back to you and a friendly wave back. Now, let's move on to the next part of the show, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we were talking about the history of cons and the weaponization of the justice system by Trump, not only as he's been in the White House, but of course, ever since he has been in business, he's used it as a weapon, whether that's against his own tenants or others that claimed that he was being discriminatory, including, as I said, that 1973 lawsuit against the U.S. government because he felt he was being targeted, unfair treated, so on and so forth. You know, wah-ha, boo-hoo, I'm Trump, and I'm, always the one being targeted by others and taken advantage of. The guy is such a little whiner. But in any event, let's go on to his NATO spending dispute. Yes, we'll jump right back into it. Now, Trump's treatment of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO, epitomized the transactional approach. He repeatedly and falsely framed the alliance's defense spending guideline as a system of payments owed to the United States, labeling allies who do not meet the target as delinquent. Now, this fundamentally misrepresents the NATO agreement, which, again, the NATO agreement is there for members that are are there committed to spending a certain percentage of their own GDP, which a guideline at the time was 2%. And that is spent on their own national defense. It is not just put in a big pool of money that, NATO spends. This is what each nation spends on their own national defense. Okay, so it's not paying fees into a central fund. It's not paying into a fund that's controlled by the United States. Now, where this really screws the United States and Trump overall is the fact that ever since he has been on this terror about NATO spending, launching tariffs at people, and just going on his bullying campaign and extortion attempts on other nations to invest, what's happened is that a lot of the NATO countries, along with others around the world, are seeing the US as an unreliable partner. People are concerned. They don't want to, rely on the United States as a major playing partner anymore. They also have concerns about any technology that's being sold to them from the White House or from US contractors when it comes down to it. So what's happened is that now the countries, as I said, are responsible for their own spending on their own military, not giving it to a pot, not giving it to the US, but the majority of all of that spending was being spent through or buying military technology, weapons, equipment, all of that. The majority of it was being spent and buying from US based contractors and US based companies. Now that Trump has done what he has done over the last 6 months, again, people are really not trusting the US, and therefore they are outsourcing to other nations. France, Italy, Spain, wherever, Japan, China. It doesn't matter at the end of the day who they're buying from. The point is they're not buying from the US at the level they had before. This is a multi-billion dollar hit to the US economy, one that Trump is pissed off about, obviously, but at the end of the day, he brought it on himself. He is the one that has created this instability within the NATO network and with countries around the world. Plain and simple. They just don't feel like they can count on and trust the US government at this point. Now, while the Trump White House has celebrated his pressure tactics of having successfully forced allies to increase their defense budgets, critics contend that any spending increases were primarily a response to Russia's 2014 invasion of Ukraine and more precisely of Crimea, and its ongoing aggression ever since. Now, this trend began before Trump took office. Now, more alarmingly, Trump's rhetoric directly attacked the core of the alliance. At a 2024 rally, he recounted telling an allied leader that if their country was delinquent, he would not only refuse to defend them from the Russian attacks, but also would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. And when I say encourage them, I'm talking about him telling Putin to do whatever the hell he wants. Now, this statement represents a direct repudiation of Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, the principle of collective defense, and that an attack on one member is an attack on all. Now, such threats sow doubt among allies. They've weakened the alliance's direct deterrent effect. And they also serve the strategic interests of the adversaries like Russia. And this is a direct result of Trump once again. Basically, he's in the back pocket of Putin, and, he'd be even closer if the pants weren't on. But again, he is Putin's protector. Let's take a look at the Ukraine scandal and the first impeachment. Now, the events that led to Donald Trump's first impeachment represent the most acute example of his willingness to subordinate U.S. national security interests to his personal political agenda in a manner that directly benefited the Kremlin. Yes, directly. Now, his pattern of difference to Putin, going back to the 2016 campaign onward, Trump displayed a consistent and unusual difference to the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. Despite the unanimous conclusion of U.S. intelligence agencies that Russia had interfered in the 2016 election to aid his candidacy, Trump repeatedly questioned these findings, often publicly siding with Putin's denials. Now, during the campaign and the presidential transition, there were at least 140 documented contacts between Trump's associates and Russian nationals or intermediaries. Very clear, but of course, we don't hear about that now, do we? Now, the Ukrainian extortion scheme, let's take a look at that. That is the scandal that erupted in 2019 when a whistleblower revealed that Trump was using the powers of his office to pressure Ukraine. In a now infamous phone call on July the 25th, 2019, Trump urged Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to announce two politically motivated investigations. One into his potential 2020 rival, Joe Biden, and his son, Hunter, and the other into a debunked conspiracy theory that it was Ukraine, not Russia, that had interfered with the 2016 US election. Again, we know where that ended up and why that was completely cleared of any wrongdoing on those sides. And it was actually Trump who was the one that was pointed to in the evidence. Now, the leverage for the demand was nearly $400 million in military aid, which had been approved by Congress but was personally put on hold by Trump just before the phone call. Now, this aid was vital for Ukraine's defense against an ongoing war with Russian-backed forces. Again, this is going back to the first Trump presidency. Now, as I said, the aid was vital, and the clear implication of a quid pro quo, the release of crucial security assistance in exchange for political favor. Now, that formed the basis of the charge of abuse of power. Now, this single act simultaneously subverted U.S. law, undermining a key foreign policy objective of supporting an ally against Russian aggression, and promoted a Russian disinformation campaign, all for the purposes of generating domestic political advantage. Yes, that is Trump. That is who we're talking about. Now, impeachment and the acquittal. Now, the House of Representatives impeached Trump in December of 2019 on two articles, abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. Despite compelling testimony from national security officials, he was acquitted by the Republican-controlled Senate in February 2020, and the vote failing almost entirely along the party lines. Again, not surprising because he uses his position to influence any vote that goes before Congress. And now he's trying to remove Congress completely from decisions by his obsession, his deep sensual obsession, apparently, with executive orders. Now, let's take a look at the blind eye to atrocity. Now, the human rights are more of an inconvenience when you talk to Donald Trump. It's not as though he wants to hold anybody personally or any governments and foreign policy responsible. Now, the Trump administration's foreign policy was characterized by a realist approach that openly dismissed human rights as a moralistic and preachy distraction from substantive business of deal making. Fancy words for he doesn't give a shit about human rights or people's lives. That's just the facts. Now, as we look at it, of course, this perspective led to a broad U.S. retreat from its traditional role as a proponent of democratic values and human rights on the global stage. He's started then, and it continues. Now, the disengagement from the human rights bodies, yes, the administration demonstrated its disdain for the international human rights framework by withdrawing from the UN Human Rights Council, defunding UN refugee agencies, and imposing sanctions on officials from the International Criminal Court, which I might add recently include a Canadian judge who, again, through the International Criminal Court process and policies, we provide the judge as well as other nations, the way that it works. But regardless, the U.S. is not a signatory on the International Criminal Court, and as a result of investigations that were about 5 years old now, Trump is bringing it up and targeting a Canadian judge as well as others around the world. And basically, they were just investigating potential war crimes involving U.S. allies and some U.S. military members as well. And that's what got Trump's feathers in a ruffle against this judge, particularly was the International Criminal Court investigation into U.S. troops about 5 years ago. But regardless, now, the Jerusalem decision, of course, on December the 6th, 2017, Trump shattered decades of U.S. foreign policy and international consensus by unilaterally recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and ordering the relocation of the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv. The final status of Jerusalem is one of the most sensitive issues in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the longstanding international position, including that of the U.S., was that it must be resolved through direct negotiations. The decision was overwhelmingly condemned globally. A UN Security Council resolution critical of the move was supported by 14 of 15 members, with the US being the sole veto. Surprise, surprise. Now, the UN General Assembly voted 128 to 9 to condemn the US declaration. For Palestinians and much of the Arab world, the move was seen as a kiss of death to the two-state solution and effectively disqualified the U.S. from its role as a neutral peace mediator. Where are we now? Again, with Israel and Palestine and Gaza and, just all of that, where Trump is so deeply in there with Netanyahu that it is beyond insane. Now, when we look at transactional peace, the administration's approach to peacemaking, whether in the Middle East or its attempt to broker a deal between Russia and Ukraine, appeared to be driven more by desire for personal accolades, such as a Nobel Peace Prize, than a commitment to the principles of justice and lasting security. By offering overwhelming and unconditional support to one side in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, while dismissing the concerns of the other, the administration abandoned the role of an honest broker, further destabilizing a volatile region. This approach reflected a consistent pattern of prioritizing transactional relationships with strongman leaders over a principled foreign policy grounded in international law and human rights. Of course, we also know the same. He wants rare earth minerals out of Ukraine. He wants ownership of their minerals. He wants them to give in to Russia, to give up all of this and concede all of this land, not only that Russia has already taken control of, but land that they haven't even taken control of. And that is the way that Donald Trump is working. He's trying to force them into giving up something that their constitution does not allow for. Furthermore, it should never be allowed for Russia to take land by force. It is against international law. It is against the principles of many international treaties and agreements. And it sure as hell should not be backed by the U.S. government to say, hey, we'll help you get peace, but you're going to do exactly what your attacker and your invader want you to do in order to get that peace. Unbelievable. Never in the history of the world have we seen such ignorance and blatant corruption out of the White House. Now, of course, when we look at the business dealings of Trump and the Trump organization when it comes to Russia, we can only speculate and guess that there's probably a lot more involved behind the scenes for the Trump family and the Trump organization, as well as Trump's crypto coins and other non-traceable positions that will probably benefit from Trump getting what Russia wants for them, but completely out of line. Now, the January 6th, 2021 attack on the United States Capitol was not a spontaneous riot, but the violent and foreseeable culmination of the patterns of behavior detailed throughout this report. We've seen the insurrection and the imperative for accountability, but where is it? Instead, they all get blanket pardons, including people that were on other charges that were much more severe. And don't take me wrong, or don't get me wrong, I believe that the insurrection was one of the worst things that ever happened to the United States when it comes on the principles of democracy and the respect that should be held at the highest regard for the White House as a national emblem of the United States, of freedom, of of so many different things. And yet it was just really demoralizing to see that happen to the capital of the United States of America and to American people. Now, let's take a look at the ultimate expression of a presidency that had consistently sought to delegitimize the democratic processes, undermine the rule of law, and place in personal and political interests of one man above the constitutional order of the nation. The subsequent failure of the constitutional system to hold him fully accountable represents a profound and unresolved crisis for the American Republic. There's no other way to put it. There's no other polite way to put it except that he screwed the American people, and he'll screw them again every chance he gets, and he continues to do so. Now, a fight like hell, yes, the road to January 6th. Let's take a look at that. The assault on the Capitol was the final act in a months-long campaign by a sitting president to overturn the results of a free and fair election. Now, people can say that the election was stolen, that it was this, that it was that, but there is no evidence. It's been investigated over and over, and it did not happen. It's just another pattern of Trump's lies and deception going back to the early 1970s and probably beyond that. I mean, he was probably trying to sell off part of his mother's womb while he was in there. And yeah, I mean, the guy's just a first-class douchebag, but let's continue anyway. The Big Lie campaign. Yes, following the decisive loss in the November 2020 presidential election, Donald Trump and his allies launched an unprecedented disinformation campaign, repeatedly issuing false statements that the election was stolen. This was claimed to be through widespread fraud, and it didn't happen. This relentless promotion of the big lie was designed to erode public faith in the democratic process and create a pretext for subverting the results. Plain and simple, he had a plan. Now, it was a coordinated pressure campaign. The effort went beyond rhetoric. Trump personally engaged in a campaign to pressure state election officials to alter vote counts. The most infamous example was a January 2nd, 2021 phone call in which he urged Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, or Perger, whatever, to find 11,780 votes, the exact number needed to reverse his loss in that state. Now, when you look at the incitement as the Save America rally, on the morning of January 6, 2021, as Congress prepared to perform its constitutional duty of certifying the Electoral College votes, Trump held a large rally near the White House. There, he repeated his false claims, telling the crowd, "We won this election and we won it by a landslide." Another regular Trump lie. He then explicitly directed his thousands of supporters to march to the Capitol, exhorting them with inflammatory language. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And that was what he was quoted as saying to the crowd, inciting them. Now, that attack on the Capitol, again incited by the president's words, a mob of his supporters marched down Pennsylvania Avenue and violently stormed the U.S. Capitol building. Their stated goal was to stop the peaceful transfer of power by disrupting the certification of the election results. Plain and simple, ladies and gentlemen, that was his goal, and that's what he wanted to happen. Now, the ensuing riot resulted in multiple deaths, including that of a U.S. Capitol police officer, Brian Sicknick, and injuries additionally to at least 174 other officers. During the hours-long assault, Trump reportedly watched the events on television, resisting calls to send help, and was initially pleased by the violence unfolding at the seat of American government. This is a president who's excited to see this. They are storming the White House, they are injuring and killing people, and he's excited to see it happening and refusing to bring in assistance. And for those who say, oh, he wasn't authorized, well, guess what? Was he authorized recently to bring the federal Marines and the or federal reserves and others into Washington, D.C. to help police it, even against the will of the people. Well, guess what? If he can do that, he sure as hell could have protected the White House and those inside on January the 6th. Now, let's take a look at the second impeachment, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the House, sorry, I'm just going to hit this. If you want to call in on WhatsApp or the regular phone lines, feel free to do so. I do believe that all the message boards on the different apps, whether it is YouTube or Facebook and LinkedIn or other live apps that we're on, I believe all of the messages come into the one central chat here. If I'm wrong, then let me know, but that's all good. Once again, you can call into area code 368-997-6741, or you can use WhatsApp calling the same line, 368-997-6741 in Canada. Now, the House of Representatives responded swiftly to the president's actions, but the subsequent Senate trial exposed the profound limitations of the Constitution's ultimate check on executive power in an era of hyperpartisanship. Now, the charge was incitement of an insurrection. On January the 13th, 2021, just 1 week after the attack, the House voted 232 to 197 to impeach Donald Trump for a historic second time. The single article of impeachment charged him with incitement of an insurrection. The vote was bipartisan, with 10 Republican members joining the all Democrats in voting to approve the article. The resolution, of course, cited Trump's sustained campaign of election falsehoods, his pressure on state officials, and his rhetoric at the January 6th rally as actions that gravely endangered the security of the United States and its institutions of government. Now, the trial and the acquittal. In the Senate trial that followed February of 2021, House impeachment managers presented a powerful and comprehensive case using extensive video footage of the attack interwoven with Trump's own public statements to argue that he was singularly responsible for the violence. Trump's defense team argued that the trial was unconstitutional because he was no longer in office and that his speech was protected by the First Amendment. On February the 13th, the Senate voted 57 to 43 to convict Trump. While this represented the most bipartisan conviction vote in any presidential impeachment trial in U.S. history, with 7 Republican senators joining the Democratic caucus, it fell 10 votes short of the 2/3 supermajority required by the Constitution for a conviction. Of course, the Republicans looking forward to their positions for a second potential Trump administration, and that is why they fell short 10 votes. Now, a failure of the constitutional safeguard. Yes, the acquittal, despite the overwhelming evidence and bipartisan support for conviction, demonstrated a critical failure of the impeachment process. Now, even an act as egregious as inciting an insurrection against a co-equal branch of government proved insufficient to trigger the Constitution's ultimate penalty. Now, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who voted to acquit on the procedural condemnation from the Senate, who voted to acquit on the procedural grounds that the former president could not be tried, nonetheless delivered a scathing practical condemnation. Now, this was from the Senate floor immediately after the vote, declaring that Trump was practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day, again, after he voted against impeachment. So, the outcome suggests that partisan loyalty had become more of a powerful force than constitutional duty for a significant portion of elected officials, rendering an impeachment, as one scholar put it, not much of a real mechanism of accountability, but more about a tool to score partisan points. Yes, so they claimed that instead of actually doing what was right for the nation, they just basically bent over and took it from behind dry and hard from Donald Trump. Now, the unfinished reckoning. Yes, that is the evidence compiled in this report that we have brought forward to you and shared with you. It's a portrait of a presidency that has systematically undermined the foundation of American democracy. The pattern is undeniable and consistent, stretching from the real estate lawsuits of the 1970s to the insurrection of 2021 and beyond to current day. Now, it's a pattern of rejecting accountability, delegitimizing institutions that seek to impose it, and prioritizing personal power and profit over the rule of law and the national interest. These tactics, honed over a lifetime of business failures and litigation, the counterpunch, the denial of facts, the declaration of victory even in defeat, they were all applied with devastatingly effect to the powers of the executive branch. Now, the result was a government weaponized against its own people and institutions. The free press was declared an enemy of the people. The Department of Justice was treated as a personal law firm for the president's political and personal vendettas. The Constitution's anti corruption provisions were tested to their limits. Alliances were extorted, adversaries were emboldened, and the powers of the presidency were leveraged to solicit foreign interference in a U.S. election. Now, this campaign of subversion culminated in the first violent assault on the U.S. Capitol since the War of 1812, and that was incited by the President of the United States in a final desperate attempt to cling to power. Yet, at every turn, the mechanism of accountability has proven inadequate. Two impeachments, one for attempting to extort a foreign ally for political gain, and the other for inciting an insurrection, ended in acquittal. This failure by the U.S. Senate to convict has set a dangerous precedent that a president can abuse power, attack the foundations of democracy, incite violence against the government itself, yet remain shielded from constitutional consequences by partisan loyalty. This is not a risk to the credibility of a single presidency, it's a direct and existential threat to the entire constitutional order. This inaction stands as a profound dishonor to the generations of Americans, particularly the brave and valiant members of the armed forces, both past and present, who have sworn an oath and given their lives to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to protect the nation from external threats, only to allow its democratic foundations to be erased by domestic actors is a betrayal of their sacrifice. Without a renewed and unflinching commitment to political and judicial accountability, the American experiment in self governance will struggle to reclaim its integrity. The golden reputation of leadership, strength, and freedom for which the United States was once respected by its citizens and by nations around the globe is in jeopardy. The reckoning for these high crimes and misdemeanors is not over, it is only being deferred. Let's hope that is the case, ladies and gentlemen. I do appreciate you taking the time to watch this extra long segment and episode of Live Chat with James here on ProPix TV of Vancouver, British Columbia. Keep in mind that this and much, much more will be covered in the new book coming up for release very soon. And let's bring up a copy of the cover for you on that, and then we'll just close out the show at that point. But let's take a look here. Where are we? There we are. So you get, again, folks, the book is coming out soon. You can reserve, pre-order and reserve a copy of the book. It is available soon. You will not be charged or sent an invoice until the book is ready to ship. At that time, you have the option to either proceed with the order, or you can choose not to. It's up to you at that point. So again, that is coming soon. Where is my... I'm sorry, folks, it doesn't seem to want to allow me to share that screen. So let's go this way and see. Anyway, there we go. So again, the storm is brewing. Trump 2.0 that is coming out very soon. It's how a chaotic president is destabilizing a nation. Yes, it is a very in-depth look at the history of Donald Trump, of his corruption, his crimes, his shenanigans, and of course his use of the legal system against his enemies. That is something that started back in the 70s. It's not something new. It's not a phenomenon that was created out of a hat. It is a long, deliberate, and continued pattern by Donald Trump in that regard. So once again, the storm is brewing will be coming out soon. If you would like to reserve a copy or pre-order, just send an email to smile, S-M-I-L-E, at propixcanada.com. That's P-R-O-P-I-C-S Canada.com. And ProPix Media will contact you when the book is ready. Again, you won't be invoiced or be contacted until the book is ready for shipping. It will not be just an endless mailing list. You will only be contacted in relation to this book order or your reservation of a book. Once again, I'm James Kuzno with ProPix TV in Vancouver, British Columbia. If you'd like more information on the various departments and subsidiaries of ProPix TV, whether that is ProPix Canada Media Limited, ProPix Artificial Intelligence, or even ProPix sister station, truecrimeandjusticetv.com, by all means. You can find it at propixcanada.com, P-R-O-P-I-C-S Canada.com. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this show. I know it's been a long one. Don't forget that your comments below are always welcome, but also make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe. Hit that bell button so you can be notified of new episodes as they come out. And of course, share all of this content with your friends, and let's see if we can bump us up big time on our subscribers. It doesn't cost anything. So again, we appreciate everyone being a part of the program and a part of getting this show to the next level. Thanks for tuning in. If you have story ideas that you would like to see discussed on the program, by all means, you can email us, or again, just post it in the chat section below. If you have investigative stories that you would like us to look into for the sister station, yes, truecrimeandjusticetv.com, or for other programs, by all means, you can email us. Once again, that is smile, S-M-I-L-E, at propixcanada.com. That's P-R-O-P-I-C-S Canada.com. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Stay safe and be careful out there.